Right now I'm at Dud Corner Cemetery and the Loos Memorial here on the battlefields of Loos. Today's the 24th of September 2025. Tomorrow, the 25th of September 2025, is the 110th anniversary of the first day of the Battle of Loos. And tomorrow, finally, 8 soldiers are being brought in from the cold and buried at Loos British Cemetery. So right now we're at Dud Corner Cemetery with the Loos Memorial on the walls surrounding it. This memorial holds the names of thousands of men who went missing in the Battle of Loos and in fighting afterwards in this area as well. We've talked about the first day of Loos before on the channel, and we know that so many of those men went into the attack, a failed attack where the lines were largely unmoved, and that meant so many men lay out in no man's land and became missing, thousands of which ended up on this memorial behind us. Incredibly, tomorrow, 110 years on from that fateful day, 2 soldiers who are currently named on this memorial have been found. And tomorrow they're going to be buried at the Loos British Cemetery. We're going to be there and I'm going to take you guys along to see. So right now we are in the Loos battlefields and you can see the big double crasiers that mark this area of landscape. The viewing platform here at Dud Corner Cemetery and the Loos Memorial gives us the ability to look out across this battlefield, and out here ahead of us is where men of the 15th Scottish Division attacked on the first day of Loos. They were to push through into the village of Loos itself and eventually on to the outskirts of Lens. So we've just come down from the viewing platform back into the memorial itself, where thousands of men from that attack are named missing. Now there's actually going to be 8 soldiers buried tomorrow, but sadly 6 of those are unknown. Thankfully though, 2 of them are known, so 2 men currently named on this memorial will have named headstones here on the Loos battlefields. One of those is J.G. Allen. That's Lieutenant James Grant Allen of the 9th Battalion Gordon Highlanders, killed on the 25th of September 1915, 110 years ago tomorrow. And if we move down ever so slightly, and the next man just up here ahead of us is G. Macpherson. That's Lance Corporal Gordon Macpherson of the 7th Battalion Cameron Highlanders. 2 named men who have been found on the battlefields, along with 6 other soldiers. So next thing we're going to do is head slightly up the road to go and have a look at where these men were found. Now, just up the road from Loos, on the outskirts of Lens, they are building a huge hospital. We're in a position now that was just on the slopes of Hill 70. This was the position of the German 2nd and Reserve lines. Incredibly, during the Battle of Loos, some men did push through Loos itself. They pushed beyond the German front lines and moved into this area here, fighting hard into the German 2nd line positions. Sadly, in a lot of cases, those men were never seen again. Now here, when they started to build the giant hospital here on the outskirts of Lens, they started to find the remains of soldiers. Now some of those men have already been buried at the Loos British Cemetery, and some of them are yet to be buried, and of course that's the story that we're here to tell today and tomorrow. Now, thanks to the work of the MOD war detectives, 2 of the 8 men that were found here have been identified, and we're going to be burying them tomorrow at Loos. So yeah, look, this is a pretty large structure. It's a huge area. You can see the cranes and the building in the background. And perhaps it's no wonder that when you start building something this extensive in the former battlefields of the Battle of Loos in the First World War, you are going to discover the remains of soldiers, and they've done so. Thankfully, that's being dealt with in the correct way, the right way, and we're being able to identify some of those men. Now, when we step down to the back of Dud Corner Cemetery, where this Loos Memorial is situated, and we look out the back, we are looking over the patch of ground where the men of the 15th Scottish Division attacked here on the first day of Loos. This position that we're at, Dug Corner Cemetery, where that Loos Memorial is situated, this was the position of a German strongpoint called the Lens Road Redoubt. And the men of the 15th Division crossed this open ground. Despite that, they managed to catch this position along with the German front lines. Incredibly, some men pushed on further into the German second line positions, and that is roughly the area where the new hospital is being built at Lens. Sadly, of course, hundreds of soldiers were killed in that attack, including these 6 unknown men, along with James Grant Allen and Gordon McPherson. So back down to the Loos Memorial. Now, as we've said, there are 8 soldiers being buried tomorrow in a ceremony over at the Loos British Cemetery. 2 of those are unknown soldiers of the Cameron Highlanders. One of those is an unknown soldier of the Highland Light Infantry. There's an unknown soldier of the Black Watch, and then 2 unknown Scottish soldiers. Alongside them, we have Lieutenant James Grant Allen of the 9th Battalion Gordon Highlanders and Lance Corporal Gordon McPherson of the 7th Battalion Cameron Highlanders. Now, of course, those other 6 men will be named on these panels behind me. Sadly, we just don't know which 6 men they are. Now, you might wonder, why would those 6 be unidentified and you could identify the other 2? Well, it all comes down to the circumstances in which their bodies were found. What artifacts were found with their body? You know, what insignias did they have? You know, if you find something that signifies that somebody is a lieutenant, well, it narrows down the pool of people that you're looking for. Then DNA testing can be done, relatives can be contacted, and there is a huge amount of work goes into that. Well, the people who do that work are the MOD war detectives, a huge painstaking process that in the case of these 2 men has taken years. Well, the next place we're going to go is over to the Loos British Cemetery. And we're going to go and tell a little bit more of the story, and we're going to have a look at where the ceremony is going to take place to bury these men tomorrow. So just on the edge of the Loos British Cemetery, we have the Loos British Cemetery extension, which is this plot just here. So this is where they have extended out to the side and created this plot for the casualties and the men that are being discovered during the work at the hospital. Now, a lot of these men are unidentified, and in fact the vast majority are unidentified, as is the case with the wider Loos Cemetery, but not all of them. In fact, just recently, about sort of 6 months ago on my Instagram, I shared the photo of the headstone here of Sergeant Ashton of the Durham Light Infantry, who was buried just a few months ago. And this is where the ceremony will take place tomorrow. Now, I'm going to be here and film the ceremony tomorrow. Of course, we've got to do that in a respectful way. I'm primarily here to pay my respects to the men who are being laid to rest here. But I'm going to film a couple of bits of it along the way. We're also very lucky that we're actually going to have the opportunity to talk to Nikki from the MOD War Detectives. Nikki played the lead role in the case to identify these 2 men who are being buried here tomorrow. So it's going to be really interesting to talk to her and ask her a couple of questions about that process. I thought that'd be interesting. It's going to be fascinating for me, and I thought it'd be interesting to share it with you guys as well. Anyway, for now, I think that's it for the day. I'm going to go get some food, rest, and I will see you back here in the morning. Good morning. So the next day here, 25th of September 2025, 110 years to the day when thousands of men went into the attack on this ground right here behind us, attacking towards Hill 70 over here on the other side of the cemetery. So we're here a little early. The actual ceremony starts in a couple of hours. I'm going to go and get some of that recorded, obviously, and share that with you guys. Just thought I'd touch a little bit on kind of the stories of the 2 identified men. Well, in fact, all of the men. So the 6 sets of remains, 8 soldiers in total, and the reason you would have 8 soldiers but 6 sets of remains largely because some of those remains would have been identifiable as far as telling it was two people, but maybe not in terms of kind of which which bones and which bits related to each guy. So in that situation, you've got two soldiers being buried together as one burial. So although there's 8 soldiers, there's 6 separate burials here today. The 2 named soldiers, then 4 other caskets, which includes 6 guys in total. So I just thought we would touch on the 2 soldiers who we've talked about and whose names we saw on the Loos memorial. So the first of those 2 men is Lieutenant James Grant Allen. Now, he was serving with the 9th Battalion of the Cameron Highlanders and went into the attack here on the 25th of September. The account of what happened to him suggests that he was fighting through beyond the German front line, pushing towards those German second line positions over on the slopes of Hill 70. He was shot twice in the chest and died of his wounds. Now, his body was never recovered. It's possible it was recovered by the Germans and maybe buried in a field grave, perhaps the shell hole where he was found. Or, of course, it's possible that he just laid there on the battlefield. The fact he was found with other remains suggests that maybe he was buried in a field grave at the time, perhaps in a shell hole that was then filled in, but either way his body was never recovered, and that's why he's been named on the Loos memorial up until now, when of course he is now buried here, or will be buried here, with a headstone. Shortly after his death, his brother, who was also serving, wrote home to their mother, and he wrote, "Dear mother, I am quite safe. I suppose you know the awful news that Jim has been killed." A friend and fellow officer of Jim's wrote home as well, and it said, "Jim's men thought the world of him. I know the officers do. I've gained from his friendship. He may have left this world, but only to go to a freer one. I've been strengthened by the thought of him or his presence." Lieutenant James Allen Grant, killed 110 years ago today, and today will be buried here at the British Cemetery at Loos. Now, the second man who we're going to see buried here today is Lance Corporal Gordon McPherson. Now, we know a little bit less about the circumstances surrounding his death. As far as I can see, there's no direct accounts of it. But he was fighting here with the Gordon Highlanders, attacking towards Lens on the outskirts of Loos, when he was killed on the 25th of September 1915. So again, 110 years ago today. Again, it's possible that he was buried in a field grave along with the other soldiers who were found there, over in the grounds of the hospital, but unfortunately we don't know the direct circumstances around his death. What we do know is part of his history and part of what led to him being identified, which is really interesting. So Gordon was originally born in Portsmouth, but moved with his family to Scotland and then eventually settled in Newcastle. Now, whilst there, his father worked as a storekeeper for the Newcastle Corporation Tramway, and Gordon was working there as a tobacconist. Now, the reason that's relevant is part of how Gordon was identified was that with his body, with his remains, were found buttons that related to the Newcastle Tramway, and that is part of how he was identified. It's incredible when you think about that. Now, later on we're going to hear a little bit more of that story when we talk to Nikki from the MOD war detectives. But first of all, let's just talk a little bit more about the wider picture here. Let's head round the cemetery and then we will go catch up with Nikki herself. Now, the soldiers being buried here at Loos British Cemetery will be in good company. There's more than 3,000 graves here. Sadly, the unidentified soldiers will be among thousands of other identified soldiers, because there's only about 900 named headstones here in this cemetery, due to the nature of the fighting in this area and the fact that in many cases the front lines remained unchanged. Thousands of men laid out in no man's land or out in those field graves, in some cases for years. Of course, in the case of these men, for 110 years, which meant they just couldn't possibly be identified. Now, thankfully, to the amazing work of the MOD war detectives, we have been able to identify 2 of those men. And what we're going to do now is chat to Nikki, who works with the MOD War Detectives. She was the kind of lead person on the case of trying to identify these men. And the tremendous work that she has done has led us to have 2 graves here with names on them that we might not have had in other circumstances. So we're very grateful to her, and very grateful to her on a busy day taking the time to talk to us. So we're going to cut over to that video now. She's going to tell us a little bit about the MOD War Detectives and a little bit about the process that she went through identifying these 2 men. Nikki, just really interested. I think a lot of the viewers of the channel will be keen to kind of learn a little bit about what you guys do. What is kind of MOD War Detectives?
So we are responsible for the identification of historic British service personnel. So that's First World War, Second World War and Korean War. Believe it or not, there's over 500,000 British service personnel still missing from those conflicts. So you can imagine that every time there's any form of construction work or anything like that happening along the Western Front, you're almost guaranteed to recover remains. So we are kept very busy.
Yeah, I can imagine. And where do you start? So, somebody finds the remains of one of these guys kind of out here in the grounds of the hospital or wherever else it might be. Where do you start? What's your process?
So when the report lands on our desk, we've always got certain pieces of information. We've got where they were found and what they were found with. And using those pieces of information, that's what we start to kind of build a bigger picture. So, we knew these guys were found over in the sort of base of Hill 70, and they were Scots. So from that, I could kind of narrow it down to a date, the sort of 25th of September 1915. And then, of course, we start to look at a candidate list. How many guys from this particular regiment killed on that date are still missing? And of course, there's hundreds from this particular action.
Yeah.
So, what we then need to do is look at the artefacts. Is there anything that kind of gives us a clue as to who they were? So, Lieutenant Allen, we found an officer's shoulder collar badge. So, that I knew that I had an officer within this group. So I was able to narrow it down to 14 for that particular case. And for Lance Corporal McPherson, he had some buttons from the Newcastle Corporation tramway. Of course, quite unusual for a Scottish soldier.
Yeah.
So going through all of the 1911 census records, seeing if we could find any of those soldiers that had a connection to Newcastle. And through kind of narrowing it down that way, we found McPherson on the census, whose dad worked for the Newcastle tramways.
Wow.
So obviously we did the DNA testing, it was positive for both of them, and I just think it's really special, like for McPherson, those buttons obviously meant something to him. They had a close kind of family meaning, and he kept them with him for the whole time he was out in France.
Wow.
So it's just really special, and it's amazing what you can learn with just the tiniest little artefacts.
Wow.
But obviously for the case of the 6 unknown, they had nothing on them that we could narrow it down. Which is really disappointing for us, but because we want to identify as many as we can.
Of course. But as I talked about in the video I'm making, there's so many thousands of unknown soldiers in the Commonwealth, cemeteries. Thank you for the work you've done to give us 2 more headstones that have names on. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. It's a real privilege to do what we do.
So look, fascinating. I'm going to try and put some links in the description. There's an MOD War Detectives Facebook page, which I follow, and I find that really interesting. So I'm going to link that in the description below, so you can go learn a little bit more about what they do. Nikki and the wider team over there, I've been speaking to a lady called Tracy there today as well. So go and check that out. I really do urge you to have a look at the incredible work that they do. Right, from this point, I'm going to cut over to show you some footage of the actual ceremony itself. I hope you guys found that interesting. It's certainly going to be an experience and something which I'm very honoured to be a part of here today. So going to cut over to that now, and I hope you guys find it interesting.
dead, strengthen our faith, that all who have died in the love of Christ will share his resurrection, who lives and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen.
This of me, that there's some corner of a foreign field that is forever England. There shall be in that rich dust a richer dust concealed, a dust whom England bore, shaped, made aware, gave once her flowers to love, her ways to roam, a body of England's breathing English air, washed by the rivers, blessed by the sons of home. And think, this heart, all evil shed away, a pulse in the eternal mind, no less, give somewhere back the thoughts by England given, her sights and sounds, dreams happy as her day, and laughter learned of friends, and gentleness, in hearts at peace, and under English heaven.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
So there you go. I hope you guys enjoyed that, taking a little look at this kind of process and telling the story of those men here today, seeing the ceremony and being part of them being buried here at the Loos British Cemetery. It's an honour for me to have been part of this today, and to have the access to better talk to some of the people involved. I hope you guys enjoyed it too. If you did, do me a favour, do all the YouTube stuff right here on the screen. It helps me out loads and loads, and I really do appreciate it. If you want to support the channel and support the work that I do to bring you these videos, you can do that via the links in the description as well. The link to my Patreon page is the best way to do that, and I'm very grateful for all of you guys who already do. In the meantime, guys, thank you very much for watching. And from here at the Loos British Cemetery, I will see you on the next video.